So, a very common question that I receive from students who are enrolled in my FE Electrical and P Power exam preparation program, just getting started, or students who are interested in pursuing, engineers who are interested in pursuing the PE licensure. Sometimes folks send me emails directly, sometimes they reach out to me via LinkedIn on DM, sometimes I answer some questions on Reddit. And in different shape, way, or form, the question is basically the same, that out of the busy schedule, how you basically find time to study for these challenging exams. And if you're already preparing for the exam, then burnout at some point is going to kick in during the FE electrical and computer or the PE power exam preparation. Reason being, these exams take multiple months, not even multiple weeks in most cases, to prepare. So we have to study smart, we have to find a way to stay motivated, and we have to make it to the finish line strong. Okay. And if you are working to the FE electrical and computer exam, you basically will not be done until you get to the stage of passing the FE electrical and computer and then moving on to the PE power and then passing the PE power. So it's a long journey, it's a significant undertaking. The difference between the FE electrical prep, the PE power prep, and the academic studying that you basically did in your undergraduate coursework or in your graduate coursework, in most cases, is that you most likely were a full-time student. I have students in my program, FE Electrical and PE Power, who actually completed their undergraduate and graduate studies on a part-time basis. I myself did my graduate studies on a part-time basis with full-time work in MEP consulting environment. But 9 out of 10 cases are of the form that you would have been a full-time student and maybe would have been working part-time, not the other way around. When you're studying for the FE electrical and computer exam prep and the P power prep, you're a full-time employee, right? Most likely if you're working full-time, and then you are a part-time student. So adjusting to that for a long period of time basically is a challenge. So burnout is one of the biggest reasons why students give up. Why burnout happens? Multiple reasons. Some folks are prone to it more than others. It depends on your mental endurance, mental capacity. If you are adept at dealing with stressful situations and are, naturally gifted to keep your cool and are able to sort of bulldoze through adversity, then it is going to be a little bit easier, right? But generally speaking, these are some of the main reasons. Too much too soon. So, what I sometimes find in some of the folks is that for a long period of time, post graduation, you've done your undergraduate 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and up until that point, up until today, you really didn't feel a need to pursue the P license. But something happens. You either recognize that for you to grow in your industry, to get promotions, to get salary increases, to get recognized, it's now or never. Okay. Other times you might see one of your colleagues passing these exams, getting the P license and getting promoted or finding a better opportunity elsewhere. So whatever that reason is, what I typically find is that there is a sudden surge of urgency in a lot of people, which is good. I mean, that is your launching pad, that you have that spark of interest, spark of urgency. So we should capitalize on that. But remember that in order to get things done, especially things that are worth achieving, you have to have sustainable intensity, not unsustainable intensity. Okay, so how do we convert that spark of motivation and stay excited for long term? That is basically the key. So, good idea to jump into the P licensing journey and getting started with your FE prep, the P power prep, but try not to just limit yourself to a weekend or 2 weeks and feel like everything is going to start falling in place right away. The other reason is that you are not able to recognize the small milestones and achievements, and you're not rewarding yourself along the way, giving yourself a pat on the back for putting in the time and effort and doing the work. So, having some sort of mini milestones incorporated along your exam preparation can go a long way, and the lack of that can be demotivating. Then, a balance between the work life, family, social activities is going to be disrupted. There is no denying. about that. Okay. You will have to scale back on probably multiple fronts, and that is a sacrifice that you have to make. The more consciously you make that sacrifice and the more consciously you tune your surroundings and your commitments, the easier it is going to be. Because imagine yourself already working 40 plus hours per week and then throwing the FE prep, the PE prep in the mix, which is most definitely going to take at least 10, 15, up to 20, maybe sometimes even more, especially at the tail end of your preparation during crunch time. So you're not creating that time out of thin air, right? That time is actually coming from somewhere. And when you make a conscious decision that, okay, the next season of my life for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months is going to be dedicated on these projects, and FE is actually, or PE is actually one of those projects. It will just make things a little bit easier because then that will be a conscious decision. Unrealistic timeline and overcommitment. So sometimes folks sign up for my program. I feel like critical P power. They're like, Wasim, I want to get the FE exam done in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks. I've had students who've actually been able to pull it off, but in majority of those cases, they were full-time students, right? They were not part-time students. Full-time students in the sense that the main thing that was on their to-do list for the next few weeks was just the FE exam prep or the P power prep. I've even had situations where folks have actually quit their full-time jobs and prepared for the FE exam and P exam. It was part of their long-term strategy game plan. They had accumulated experience, and their finances and whatnot allowed them to take that approach, very aggressive approach, very very rare. Not that I recommend, but there are those cases are outliers, right? If you're a new graduate, just graduated, or are in the final year, and you're academically at the top of your class, and a lot of concepts are already in your mind, then maybe the preparation is going to be a lot easier for you. But you are not a typical scenario. The typical scenario for folks preparing for FE electrical and FE electrical is on average 3 to 4, 5 years out of school, and for P power at least 5 to 6, 7 years of experience, and then they're basically preparing for these exams. And then on either side you have other examples. So be realistic about what you are up against, and that will basically help you put in the required amount of time and effort. And when the goings get tough, you'll realize that it is part and parcel of what you are achieving. And trying to study every topic equally. Now, this is very, very crucial. Sometimes I have students who sign up for the program, and they start selectively, strategically in their mind, improvising with their preparation. So I onboarded one student just yesterday. He's in a repeat situation, was using some free resources for FE electrical, and then it's like I was getting stumped because I knew that I wasn't making progress. Showed up for the exam, failed the exam, enrolled in my program, and it's like, Wasim, based on my past experience, I know what my weaknesses are. So I'm actually going to start from electronics. I'm after completing electronics, I'm going to go into control systems or something like that, one of the other sections, and then I'll take the exam very quickly. And my response was that your self-assessment of what your strengths and weaknesses are is based on your limited exposure to some free resources or some practice material that you've done. You will not be able to make a sound judgment of your strengths and weaknesses until you have covered the entire exam specification. That is true for FE electrical as well as PE power. And not all sections in these exams are made equal, quite literally. Okay. You have certain sections explicitly being heavily weighted as compared to some of the other sections. For example, in FE electrical, we have the big five. We have the math, circuits, electronics, power, and digital systems. If I was to pick one of these sections, then I would say circuit analysis has the farthest reach, farthest impact, the most significant impact on the entire FE electrical and computer exam specification, because it impacts electronics, impacts power, linear systems, and it is also a very, very heavily weighted topic, right? So you should slow down, you should absorb the content a little bit more and give it more attention and respect when you're going through circuits. When we deal with, let's say, P power prep, now the format has revised. They have 9 sections instead of 4 sections. We have what I like to call as the big 3 topics. We have our section number 9, which is protection, a heavy hitter. We have electrical safety, which is a heavy hitter. And although our section number 4 is not the biggest hitter, it has three topics, subtopics in it, three phase symmetrical components and per unit, which are just line items in a section, or you can consider them subsections. But those three line items have an outsized impact on the rest of P power exam, because if you cannot handle square root 330 degrees, if you cannot handle the sequence components fault analysis later down in section number 8, you won't be able to make much progress. If you cannot deal with per unit systems, similarly transmission line models and power system stability, and then power flow, even protection and coordination is going to be impacted. So if you are flying blind and don't have the guidance, then this can also be a little bit annoying. Even math section number 1 can bog you down, right? You can start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, and then the level of detail can sort of overwhelm you, and that typically results in burnout. And there can be other reasons. You can have stuff going on in your personal life, you can have stuff going on in your professional life. Some folks, during the FE prep, P prep, have health scares and whatnot. So a lot of those things, job losses, right? So many different things can happen, but these are some of the most common factors that I've noticed. So how can we avoid the burnout for FE electrical and P power prep? You might have heard this in different contexts, that this project is a marathon, not a sprint, right? The exam prep is a marathon, not a sprint. That's what they say about weight loss, that weight loss is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Try not to crash your diet in 4 weeks, losing 10 pounds or something like that, right? It has to be a lifestyle adjustment. I like to call the FE electrical and P power prep a mindset adjustment. Okay. And if you're already the type of a person who's an incrementalist, right? And you want to sort of step by step increase your competency, then that, in my opinion, is the best way to go about FE electrical and the P power prep. There is no practical way to be able to do it, to do everything in a single day or a single week, or I would even say a single month, with certain exceptions. And I have stories on my YouTube channel, success stories. Folks tag me on LinkedIn, a lot of times on Reddit and whatnot as well. There are people who are able to pull this off within a month, but they are exception rather than norm. And when you look at their particular scenario in a little bit more detail, you'll find that they're new graduates, or they were working, they lost a job, they're working full time, they wanted to really get into the job market again, and they found that the EID certification, passing the P power exam, is going to boost the chances. So they're really zoned in, right, in most of the cases, but those are exceptions. For the vast majority of folks who are preparing for these exams are working full time. Remember that progress compounds with consistency, not perfection. This is a very important point when it comes to the P power and the FE electrical prep. You can waste an entire day of studying, whatever it amounts to in terms of number of hours, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, if you're studying over a weekend, maybe 8 hour session, being fixated on one very minute thing. I am sure that at certain point in our academic career, while studying for different exams, we found ourselves in that situation. Like something is just not clicking, and then we just are looking at it from different angles. And if only someone can help us resolve that issue, we would basically be able to make progress. Now, it's a fine balancing act, because reflecting on different concepts, especially if it is something that you are learning for the very first time, reflecting, struggling, getting frustrated, it is part of the learning process. Okay. But burning through a couple of hours, 3 hours, just being stuck on one practice problem is not the best idea. Now, in this day and age, we have ChatGPT, so you can get a little bit of support and maybe would be able to answer the question in more detail than an average tutor or an instructor. But these type of instances are going to occur in over and over again. Definitely use all the resources that are at your disposal, but this is where strategic game plan and an effective exam prep resource with support structure can help you a lot. And if you're doing a group studying, then that can sort of help alleviate that issue as well. Typically, the smartest student, I generally don't like to use the word smart in my definition based on my observation and experience. Smartness is very subjective, but I would say folks who are trying to go about this exam preparation effectively, they actually look at things strategically. In fact, the very first lecture that I have in my FE electrical program and the even the P power program, I go over the entire specification in a strategic manner, right? If you guys are active on Reddit or do your research there, you're gonna see in FE electrical the word Big Five gets used a lot in the context of FE electrical and computer. I actually coined that term in the context of FE electrical several years ago, and now it's sort of part of the vocabulary in the group who's preparing for the FE electrical and computer exam preparation. So you have to strategically look at the big five topics because those five sections are amounting to about 50% of the entire exam by weightage, right? And there is a strategy to handle the computer sections because the computer sections are typically not the strength of a lot of power systems engineers, a lot of electrical engineers. You might not even have taken some coursework. Similarly, in the P power prep, there are folks who get stumped by your NEC portion, your codes and standards portion, typically new graduates who don't have much experience. So, how do you basically go about all of that? So, you have to look at the exam preparation strategically, and when you do that, it basically makes your life easier. I recommend students who are preparing for the FE electrical and the P power exam preparation to use a three-phase approach, three-step approach, whatever you want to call it. The first one is a broad coverage, and this is probably going to take most of your time. So if you're preparing for the FE electrical and computer exam, then the 17 sections that you need to complete, top to bottom math all the way to software engineering, properties of electrical materials, probability, stats, ethics, engineering, economics, circuits, linear systems, communication, signal processing, the whole 9 yards. That is going to be the first order of the business. That's your primary objective. That's the main mission in the first go. Okay, and when you're dealing with the P power prep, same thing. We have 9 sections now as per the October 1st, 2025 exam specification. And completing those 9 sections and all the subtopics comprehensively is going to be phase one. Phase two is to hit the weaknesses, right? In my programs, I give my students spreadsheets with all the topics and the lectures and whatnot, and they rate every single piece of content as easy, medium, or difficult. And I recommend them not to sort of keep on circling back to the topics that they find challenging because we got to make progress in one direction. But now that you have that dashboard, a personalized qualitative assessment of your strengths and weaknesses locally hosted on your computer, which you had been updating on a weekly basis, then you have a very clear vision of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And during your round two of review, you revisit the difficult areas with focused effort. Okay. And practice number three is primarily driven by full and computer simulated practice exams that I have in my program, and NCA sample exam you can use as well. And that's when we basically zero in on very subtle gaps in our understanding, and our goal is then to close those gaps. Okay, so this is a three-phased approach. When you are in phase number one, you don't worry about whether I'm retaining everything as I'm moving forward. Very common question. Okay, Wasim, I'm halfway through the coursework. I feel like I'm forgetting conic sections, but I feel electrical. Wasim, I'm halfway through the P power preparation. I'm starting to forget the equations related to burden of a CT, right? You don't have to worry about it. You just keep on moving forward while keeping track of your weaknesses. Rate the topics easy, medium, difficult. Once you're done 100% with the coursework, with the progress completion, you then move on to phase two. In phase two, you're going to be doing intentional selective strategic review, where you open up that spreadsheet that is tracking your strengths and weaknesses. And now in section number one of PE power, if burden calculation was bothersome for you, or the ratio error calculation, the knee point of a CT, whatever the topic is, then you go to that particular piece of knowledge, work through the practice problems, lecture resources, whatever you're using, and then hammer that one more time. What ends up happening is that some of these problematic topics, actually, when you revise them, okay, it might be an isolated topic like this, but then by reviewing that topic, you're able to review the tangential associated auxiliary topics, right? I like to give the example of compound exercises. If you're doing the four major compound exercises, you actually don't necessarily have to do a lot of isolation work. For example, if you're doing squats, deadlift, bench press, shoulder press, back row, depending on So the 4 or 5 major compound exercises. You don't necessarily have to work on your biceps, right? You don't necessarily have to work on your shoulders. You don't necessarily have to sort of do tricep pulls and whatnot. Would be good, but as long as you're doing a few major, addressing these major roadblocks, right, in your preparation, for example, over here, core concepts, 3 phase per unit, if that's what was bothering you, then automatically the surrounding stuff is going to get taken care of. Okay, and then finally, when you're in the practice exam mode, it is further isolated, very streamlined, focused, surgical review of the gaps. Practical burnout strategies. Now, on a day to day basis, how do we execute it? What are going to be our tactics? I don't recommend students to basically hit more than one or maximum two core topics as part of their to-do list. Like, try not to do a whole bunch of different knowledge pieces in 1 week. Keep it simple and keep it manageable. Okay. Take ideally one full day off every week. Now, it may not be possible, especially if you are a weekend warrior. If Saturday and Sunday are the only times of the week, days of the week where you get the opportunity to study, it may not be possible. In that case, you just have to sort of bulldoze through this preparation and take micro breaks during the day or however you can plan it out. But taking a break is extremely, extremely important. Okay. Develop a consistent study plus a break routine. Sort of building on these topics, so recommendations over here. Consistency is the name of the game in terms of continuation of your preparation from day one until your exam day. Consistency is also the name of the game in terms of your, let's say, sleeping routine, eating routine, working out routine, right? If you're able to develop a rhythm and a routine, and I would even go ahead and say that studying at the same time of the day, in the same location, in the same setting, is probably going to make it even much more natural. So don't study one day in a library, don't study one day in your living room, don't study one day in your office, the other day in a coffee shop. Okay, try to stick with one place at one time on a consistent basis. You're going to start associating that time of the day and that place wherever you are studying for just one purpose, and that would be studying. It makes the life so much easier. Okay. And I actually adopted this tip from a book called Atomic Habits from James Clear. I always knew that it sort of makes it easier if there is a dedicated utilization for a particular resource. But then in his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear actually gives a lot of examples and scientific literature and background and studies and whatnot. And since then, I actually try to just do certain things at a certain time at a certain different places, and it makes it very easy. Yeah. Mix different learning modes. A lot of folks who are in my program tell me that one of the primary reasons, a lot of them start with my book. There are a lot of folks who actually are able to pass these exams. My both study guide for FE Electrical PE Power, they're the highest rated books in the category, 5-star ratings, hundreds of reviews. So some people just simply find the books as a good resource to sort of study and review. This is my PE Power book. It's blurry, but then there are the folks who like the more audio visual explanations. And so if you want to incorporate a few different learning techniques, try them out and maybe one or two will click with you. And when you're using a particular resource, try to switch things up. Maybe if you're getting tired of just doing a whole bunch of practice problems, maybe skip some of the practice problems and just focus on the video learning or the other way around. So mixing different learning modes can be super helpful as well. And this point, which I sort of made a little bit earlier at the beginning, was that you have to get a kick out of progress, not perfection. Because if you are able to see meaningful progress, and students tell me that within my coursework, there's a progress tracker, a very visual indicator. You're done 10%, 12%, 14%, 16% of the entire course. It sort of gamifies it, makes it a little bit easier, right? Perfection, especially in phase one, is not even recommended. Okay. Don't worry about retention, obsession with retention. Oh, I'm forgetting. I don't know if I'm making even progress. That is counterproductive. So either the built-in progress, or you keep a diary, you keep your own tracking mechanism, your spreadsheet, you use AI, you use ChatGPT, however, whatever you want to use, right? A system should be in place that indicates to you the progress you're making or lack thereof. So a simple graph, a simple sort of to-do list, crossing things out, either on sticky notes and whatnot, whatever it is, just make sure that you are able to relate the effort that you're putting in with the progress that you're making. Extremely important. When you're able to make that connection, that the more effort I put in this week, the more progress I made this week. Next week was super busy, so the progress was kind of lagging behind. But the following week, when I was able to crank up my level of effort, you're able to basically see this. And that's why in the gym, going back to the gym example, you guys probably know that the fastest gains, the fastest results, and improvement is made by folks who are actually least active. So if you're starting as a couch potato and you're consistent even for a couple of weeks, your progress from being a couch potato to the results that you're going to see typically are going to far overshoot um, a person who is 2 to 3 times, 4 times in the gym, because their progress is kind of plateaued, right? But the initial gains are really helpful. And that is, I guess, in some ways, nature's way of giving you the incentive, instant boost that, the effort you put in, you get the result. And when it comes to the FE electrical prep, it's easy because math is section number one, and students are able to see very quickly that they're able to recall basic mathematics, right? And then FE electrical tends to become progressively more challenging, difficult as we get into phase two of second half of the exam, which is the afternoon session post electronics, section number 10 onwards. In the PE power exam, it's a little bit different because the level of difficulty for the P power is kind of above average from the get go. The very first topic that we see, instrument transformers, is not even in the reference handbook. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make over here is that regardless of how you're basically approaching this, it's extremely important for us to focus on progress, not to focus on perfection. Okay. Don't get, as they say, perfection is the enemy of good, right? Or something to that effect. Or perfection is the enemy of progress. We definitely want to really tune up our preparation and really understand the concepts, get to level 3 understanding, and know things from first principles. All good stuff. But that happens in phase 2 later on when we are doing our strategic review. That happens in phase 3 when we are using the practice exams and addressing the gaps. And finally, I like to close out by saying that building the momentum slowly but surely, staying consistent, not going in for the jugular in the very first week and imagining that you'll be able to crush this exam in a couple of weeks or even a month. I don't think that's realistic. And once your expectations are not realistic, you're bound for disappointment. And stay confident. Have self belief. I've had mechanical engineers, non-electrical engineers. I have had folks who've gone through my FE program, P Power program without any electrical background, passed these exams in the first attempt. And the one thing that they brought to the table was the fact that they were confident and they were willing to basically do what's required to get this done. Okay. So remember, if you are experiencing burnout, if you're not experiencing yet, chances are you are at some point going to experience when you get on to your P licensing journey, especially if you're working full time and have other personal professional commitments. Structure your preparation using the 3-phase model in mind. I mean, that's what I recommend my students. Everyone's learning style is slightly different, but this is what works for most of the folks. Protect your energy as well. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to manage my time, but management of energy is super important. Sometimes taking a step back can help you take 10 steps forward. So taking a little bit of a break, mental break, having yourself engage in activities that sort of give you a boost, whether it's workouts, reading, spending quality time with friends, family, or just doing nothing, right? Sometimes that is probably the best break that you can get. And then reward yourself, acknowledge yourself at least about the progress you're making. And remember that as you're progressing, you're not behind. If you're making progress in FE electrical, it carries over about 30% into P power preparation, 25%. And when you're making progress in the P power exam preparation, in my program, I like to tell my students that the goal is actually not only to pass these exams confidently. The goal is to brush up your skill set as a power systems engineer so that once you get the P license, you can actually be a lot more confident and feel competent in terms of your craft. Okay. And my approach is always conceptual understanding combined with high quality practice problems, not the other way around. It's easy to find yourself busy doing a whole bunch of practice problems. There are quiz banks out there, thousands of practice problems, mindlessly doing practice, numbering, number crunching, and whatnot. But if you really want to pass this exam comfortably, you need to develop conceptual understanding. Okay, I hope you found this helpful. And burnout is real, so be on the lookout and don't let it crash your exam preparation, crash your P licensing dreams. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. On a weekly basis, I'm creating content for FE Electrical and P Power exam preparation. I also discuss topics related to electrical engineering with a focus on power systems engineering. If you'd like to learn more about my FE Electrical and P Power exam preparation programs, please visit my website, studyforfe.com.